Kate Moore, The Radium Girls, The Dark Story of America's Shining Women. Dive into the harrowing tale of The Radium Girls, The Dark Story of America's Shining Women, by Kate Moore. This eye-opening account unveils the dark side of the radium craze during the early 20th century and its tragic impact on the lives of female workers. Discover how women were lured by lucrative offers to work with highly toxic, radium-infused paint in factories, all while being kept in the dark about the risks involved. The book explores the health effects these workers faced, their courageous fight for justice, and the lasting impact their struggle had on workplace safety regulations in the United States.
Radium, the miracle cure turned poisonous. In the early 20th century, radium was marketed as a miracle cure for cancer and infused in beauty and health products. A glass jar lined with radium was sold as a remedy for ailments, and radioactive paint was used on watch dials to make them glow in the dark. But as the dangers of radium exposure became public knowledge, manufacturing companies turned a blind eye. The different radioactive isotopes of radium, namely radium-226 and mesothorium or radium-228, have long half-lives, which means that the effects of the radiation exposure last for many years. The workers in the watch factories who dealt with radium-laced paints were poisoned, and the damage took 6 years to have in strength. Radium's radioactive properties continue to deteriorate long after death, making it a deadly poison. Deadly work of radium. In the early 1900s, the United States Radium Corporation, USRC, in New Jersey hired women to hand-paint watch dials using poisonous, radium-based paint. These women were paid by the watch, and the faster they worked and the more paint they exposed themselves to, the more they earned. These positions were highly sought after among working-class women, and entire families of women ended up working alongside one another. At the end of the day, the workers would leave the studio covered in the powdered radium used to make the paint, and some even ingested it by using a technique called lip pointing, in which they twirled the tips of their brushes between their lips. The hazardous technique was being taught to workers all over the country, including the studios of the Radium Dial Corporation in Illinois. The paint contained such small amounts of radium, but putting those brushes in their mouths for months on end led to tragedy. Radioactive Tragedy. Women in the watch painting studios were unknowingly poisoned by radium, causing severe health issues, including death. It took years to properly diagnose the problem, leading to a tragic outcome for many. In the early 1900s, watch painting was a coveted job for young women, offering good pay, independence, and a sense of pride. However, little did they know that the luminous, glowing substance they used to paint the watches was slowly killing them. Radium, a substance believed to cure ailments, was seeping into their bones and causing severe health disorders. The workers began to experience jaw pain, abscesses, loose teeth, and their gums wouldn't heal. It wasn't until years later that doctors identified the problem as radium poisoning, but by then, several girls had already died. Molly Maggia, a 19-year-old girl, was the first to succumb to the disease. Despite the obvious signs of illness, the women's plight was ignored, for no one had heard of such radiation poisoning before. The situation only gained attention when a respected physician, Dr. Harrison Martland, agreed to conduct tests on a group of sick girls. The diagnosis of radium poisoning came as a shock to everyone. The women's radioactive bodies were a ticking time bomb, and by the time they learned the truth, it was too late. Medical bills piled up, and the young women were unable to work, forcing them into poverty. The situation demanded justice. The story of the Radium Girls is a tragic and terrifying lesson in the consequences of ignorance, corporate greed, and the dangers of exposure to untested substances. Despite the tragedy, the Radium Girls' efforts paved the way for future worker safety advocacy, heightening awareness about the hazards of working with radioactive materials. Firms in denial. Despite overwhelming evidence of the health hazards their employees faced, companies like USRC and RDC tried everything to avoid responsibility. In some cases, they buried autopsy results or hired unqualified experts to testify against their workforce. As a result, workers had a hard time finding suitable legal representation, and some opted to settle for paltry sums rather than take their chances in court. Although some received compensation, the company's negligent behavior highlights the importance of transparency and accountability in the workplace. The Radium Girls' long legal battle. In the 1920s, 5 Radium Girls and their families received a settlement for their medical expenses, court fees, and a pension. However, the United States Radium Corporation, USRC, attached unhelpful restrictions that made future payments difficult to receive. A guilty verdict was delivered in a former Radium Dial Corporation, RDC, employee's case in 1938. However, the RDC appealed the decision 8 times until the Supreme Court ruled in favor of the plaintiff. Despite the victory, the outcome was bittersweet as the plaintiff had already passed. Nonetheless, this ruling would serve as a precedent for other cases involving criminal negligence by corporations. The tragic legacy of Radium Girls. In the 1920s and 30s, women fought for equal treatment and respect. The Radium Girls' tragic fate brought significant changes to society. The case guided the development of safety measures for the Manhattan Project and led to the creation of the Occupational Safety and Health Administration. Despite this progress, corporations still prioritize profits over their workers' safety. The Radium Girls' story continues to serve as a reminder of the dangers of corporate greed and the need for accountability.
In conclusion, the Radium Girls sheds light on the shocking truth about the radium industry and the extraordinary struggles these brave women endured. Their heart-rending story not only highlights the dangers of corporate greed and the exploitation of workers but also emphasizes the monumental changes their fight brought about, including the establishment of the Occupational Safety and Health Administration and improved safety measures for handling hazardous materials. Their legacy stands as a testament to the power and resilience of those who dare to confront unjust practices, reminding us of the importance of advocating for better working conditions and raising awareness about occupational hazards.